We have a new Samsung SSD around the block, the 990 Pro. Okay, it's brand new. It says blistering speed, endless victory.
To my coming at first light on the fifth day, at dawn.
The question is it worth it over the 980 Pro? Do you know what is worth it? This sponsored segment.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out WhoKeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out WhoKeys.com in the video description below.
So first of all, we've got to understand that Samsung actually hasn't got a drive yet until now that is over 7,000 megabytes per second read and write speed kind of category. We have the Kingston KC3000 from Kingston. We have Seagate FireCuda 530. We have XPG Gamix S70. We have Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus, which is just over 7,000 megabytes per second. And I'm sure there's some others, but Samsung has only the Samsung 980 Pro, which is up to 7,000 megabytes per second. But now with this Samsung 990 Pro, as you can see from the box over here, it is advertising read speeds of up to 7,450 megabytes per second. So some of the specs then. It is a Gen 4 NVMe SSD, and it's really, you know, capping to the right in the top of the NVMe 4 speeds of 7,000 plus megabytes per second. So the highest of the highest, competing in the kind of like Formula 1 of SSDs. It comes in 3 different sizes, 1, 2, and 4 terabytes. The read speed is advertised 7,450 megabytes per second, and the write speed is advertised 6,900 megabytes per second, which we'll test in a moment. So I tested these SSDs in this balls to the wall PC build. If you haven't seen that one, feel free to check that out. It's a RTX 3090 Ti. We have a Intel i9 12900KS. We have 128 gigabytes of DDR5 from Kingston Fury Beast RGB as well. We have Asus Z690 Pro motherboard, and we are running Arctic Liquid Freezer 420mm AIO in the Fractal Torrent case. So on the screen on the left side we have the 980 Pro. As you can see on the top left corner, you can see that the type of things as well. So this is the 980 and this is 990 on the right. So this first test is ATTO test, and this tests the storage, a little bit of different file sizes. Okay, as you can see, file sizes get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the bigger they are, the usually easier it is sequential read and write speed. So if we look at the lower end of the speeds, which is 0.5 kilobytes and then up to like 4 kilobytes, you can see that the 990 Pro is actually quite a bit faster in the write speeds. As you can see here, the 640 compared to 550 write speeds here, the 2 kilobytes is quite similar, the 1 kilobyte is quite similar as well, and then the 512 bytes is slightly faster on the 990. If you look at the read speeds, 512 bytes is about 13% faster. As you can see, 100 megabytes versus 87, and 1 kilobyte is 28 megabytes per second faster, so quite a bit here as well. About 50 megabytes per second faster on the 2 kilobyte one, and then the 4 kilobyte one is actually quite a bit faster now here, about 80 plus megabytes per second. So why is this very important? It means that all the smaller files, which is actually what most of the PC does, if you have like an operating system or something like that running, there's lots of small files that constantly get read and written and write and written, write and that. So the faster it is at those random read and writes, that is the better or kind of snappier the system feels, or the least the system has to wait for the SSD to read and write things, and the faster the SSD feels, which we can see over here. When we move like to the kind of mid-range part over there, from 8 kilobytes to about 256 kilobytes, you can see that the 990 is a little bit faster in the read and write speeds, but sometimes they trade blows as well. When we move on from about 512 kilobytes to 54 megabyte writes, you can see that our read speeds are quite a bit faster, up to 0.5 gigabytes per second faster. As you can see, we're pretty constantly around 6.3 to 6.2 kind of gigabytes per second. Here on the 980, we are a little bit slower, but the big thing is the write speeds. I mean, look at that. Even on the graph, you can see that the reds are here much lower at just over 4 gigabytes per second, whereas the write speeds here on the 990 are all the way close to the read speed, so like very close to 6 gigabytes per second there, which just shows that writing the files on the SSD is much faster on the 990 Pro. Ultimately, the biggest file size read speed is about 250 megabytes per second faster, and the write speed is roughly about 2 gigabytes per second faster, almost 2 gigabytes per second faster, which is quite a big difference. Moving on to Blackmagic disk speed test, you can see that the 980 is quite a bit faster on the write speeds, as we saw previously as well. 5.2 compared to about 4, so about 1.2 gigabytes per second faster. In terms of the read speeds, we're not that much faster, but still sequential read speed is slightly faster. This is Crystal Disk Mark, and this is the first test I did on both of them. You can see that the read speed is slightly faster, about 200 megabytes per second faster, but the write speed is quite a bit faster, literally almost 2 gigabytes per second faster. And this is the third test I did in a row. You can see the read speed, we're getting a little bit faster, about 7.1 gigabytes per second. So we're going past the 7 gigabytes per second read speeds. We're not quite reaching the 7.45 advertised, but maybe this was just because of the PCIe slot I had on the motherboard. I had them on the 3rd and 4th slot rather than on the 1st slot that's directly connected to the CPU. Maybe I would have got faster speeds when I would have connected it to that slot, but at the moment they're still very fast, but about 300 megabytes short of the advertised speeds. But I'm sure you're not gonna feel that. But write speed is quite a bit faster, over 1.8 gigabytes per second faster. Interestingly, here on the sequential 128 kilobytes Q32T1, the 980 is actually over 7 gigabytes per second as well, read speed, which is just interesting analysis. One more thing I want to talk about is the terabytes written spec. If you don't know what that is basically terabytes written is the rating for each SSD, how many times these cells can be rewritten in the next 5 years. Usually it's rated for the next 5 years, and the rating for these is the same as before on the 980. So the 990 is rated at 600 terabytes written in the next 5 years, and that's kind of the warranty period where it's said, look, if you write this drive over 600 times, okay, then this is still within the spec of warranty, which equates to about 328 gigabytes per day. So if you do exceed that amount daily, then I don't recommend these drives, and maybe go more for the write-centric drives. For example, Seagate FireQ the 530 that has 3 times the terabyte written spec as these two, but it's probably more expensive as well. So this 990 is really read-centric drive, and this is nice to see. So this is good for your OS drives, if you're gamers, or your game drive, or your PS4 drives or something like that, that reads a lot of the files, right, but doesn't write that many files on the SSD. But to be honest, I'd like to know the people, apart from creators, who write over 328 gigabytes per day on the drive. It's still quite a good spec. Also, Samsung is very much known for the reliability, and I expect this 990 Pro to have the same reliability as the 980, which is fantastic. Interestingly, looking at the hardware like changes here, the 990 on the top here, you can see that the actual controller here is actually smaller than the bigger one in here. So everything else, like these NAND chips here, they're probably like 500 megabytes each, and then this is the DRAM. They haven't changed, but the actual controller is different, and that is most likely I'm not sure here what was the previous process that they used, or the node process that they used for the previous controller, but the new one uses the Samsung 8nm controller, which equates to more efficient controller and more efficient, power consumption, so you get more performance per watt. As much this is nice for everyday user, for us it doesn't really matter because we're talking about such a small amount of watts. If you have one or the other drive, you're never going to see a difference in your electricity bill until we have like 100 of these drives in your system. Yes, then we're going to see a difference in the bill because there's a few hundred watts difference. But right now here is not that different. In terms of specs though, it can be up to 50% more efficient per watt compared to the 980 Pro, which is just fantastic to see that we get more efficient and use less electricity, but we get more power. Other than that, the drives look very, very similar. And interestingly, on Samsung drives, on the bottom, can you see this shiny little copper end? So they do have like a little sticker underneath the drive as well, probably to have a little heat dissipation going on there as well. But that was on the previous drive as well. Okay, about the price now. I've asked what this price would be, but since I've got the pre-released product over here, it's not on the market, I don't know what the price actually is here. But if you do want to know, check out the links in the description below, because I'm going to link it down there, then you'll see the price. Once you find out, please let me know in the comment section below, so others can find out that as well. But if you want to know if this is worth it over the 980 Pro, then I think if you want just the best Samsung drive, then yes, the 990 Pro is the new best drive. The best thing that actually is going to happen is most likely now when we have the new king on the streets, the 980 Pro will become more affordable, which means that the 980 Pro actually is more bang for buck basically for you, which is good news for us. But if you do want the blistering speeds and endless victory, I don't quite know how that endless victory can be translated into actual, performance, then that is the drive. I personally think if you're shopping for the high-end drives, like the Samsung 980 Pros, if you're looking for the most reliable and just want to know, look, this drive will just work and that, then Samsung has that kind of reputation, right? I'm not saying the other brands don't have that, but just, for example, Puget Systems, I'm sure you've heard of them, they report that they have hardly any drive failures with the Samsung 980 Pros they tested and the Samsung drives, and they have shipped out thousands and thousands of drives, which is very, very good, kind of quality control rate there that they hardly ever fail. But if you're looking for these high-end drives, I would also recommend you check out like the Kingston KC3000 and the Seagate 530 just to check out the prices between those two, because they're all in the very high-end level of things, perform very, very similarly, but the price can be quite a bit different. So I'll leave those in the description below as well if you want to check them out. Is it for creators or is it for gamers? Now, I'd say if you're a creator and you push a lot of large files through the SSD, maybe look for the more like bigger terabytes written spec, because that might be a bit more important for you, just so that you know that your SSD will last a bit longer rather than this 600 terabytes written spec. Maybe look for like 1200 terabytes written spec for the 5 years. That will be better. But for someone who's looking just a really high blisteringly fast SSD for your PS4 gaming PCs or something like that, OS drive, that's the drive for that. I'd say this drive is an awesome drive for your OS drive that just needs to read and write lots of random things, very small things. That's going to be the best drive for you. Check those drives out in the description below. But if you're here and you want to build yourself a Creator PC, check out the Creator PC playlist in the description below. There's 4-part series, and for every single budget from 750 to 5 grand, there's going to be a PC that you can build. There's build guides and all sorts of stress guides, all the guides there. You can pick the parts, build it yourself and put it together. There you go, check it out in the description below. Whoa, below. Okay, likes and subs, and bye bye.